Everyone. I'm so glad to welcome you to my interviews with subject matter experts on topics that are important to you and important to your students and your families. My name is Cyndy McDonald, and I'm very proud and honored to have with me Greg Zaiser he's the Vice President for Enrollment at Elon University. Thanks for joining me today, Greg.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Cyndy.
How do you say your last name? I looked at it, I realized
it's Zaiser, just like Kaiser.
Zaiser.
Yeah.
So
but everybody says Zaiser, so when you said that, I was not surprised in the least. No problem.
Well, it's like the town I live in. Everybody looks at it and it's Visalia. It's Visalia. Nobody can pronounce it right. So thank you for that.
Sure. Thank you for asking.
Great. Share a little bit about your background. How did you come to be a vice president for enrollment at Elon?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking. It was I have to tell you, Cyndy, it was not really, it was not something that I aspired to be. I'll just be very honest. I'm privileged to be in this position and have been for 10 years. I have been at Elon for 32 years, believe it or not. I'm one of those lifers. There are a few of us left out there that represent our universities in this particular role that are alumni of our respective institutions. But, obviously, much like most people who go into the enrollment world or the admissions world anyway, I was a tour guide. And
I have heard that a lot.
So when I talk to students, and oftentimes they'll ask me, well, tell me about your career trajectory. I'll say it started doing exactly what you do. And I loved being a tour guide, naturally. I still say to people that my very best job, my very favorite job was being, a roadrunner, an admissions counselor. I think I was turned on to the world of admissions largely by my admissions counselor when I was looking at Elon and going through the process and looking at multiple schools. But my admissions counselor made a difference for me. And to this day, she and I are still Facebook friends and have some fairly routine communication. So it was that. I mean, I could tell you stories that, would just be amusing to anyone listening. But, some of the things that we often remember, not what someone said, but how they made us feel, right? That's an important thing. Mm-hmm. And once upon a time, I wrote my admissions counselor, because this was in the day before email, and it was around St. Patrick's Day, and she wrote me back in green ink. And, I mean, I'm not kidding. More than 35 years later, I still remember that. And that was just a moment where I thought, this is a way I could build a relationship with people. And so the short of it is, frankly, I was privileged to have my first position was as an admissions counselor for Elon. It was a great job. I did my graduate degree while I was running up and down the Eastern Seaboard for the first several years of my career, thinking that I was going to return to my home state of New Jersey. But opportunity presented itself. I actually left admissions for a few years, stayed at the university, but then came back a few years later. And I worked in university advancement. I loved that, thought that was going to be my career. And then came back to admissions and have been fortunate to hold many different positions that have given me lots of experience. So I was director of international admissions. I was director of graduate admissions. I was dean of undergraduate admissions for 6 years. And this is a long answer to your question, but all of those experiences really, I think, positioned me for the role as chief enrollment officer. And so that's how I became Elon's vice president for enrollment in 2012. So,
well, that's exciting.
Yeah.
And I think it's helpful for us as counselors and also for the students and the parents that we serve to understand that, these paths are diverse and we come from different areas. Yeah. What was your major? What did you major in when you were in college?
I have an undergraduate degree in management, business management, and I have an MBA. So, that's also a question that a lot of students will ask and people will ask, because to your point, Cyndy, a lot of people who work in the enrollment world, who work in higher education, come to it from very different academic disciplines. And I think that's what makes for a great, team, frankly, when we have staff members who were psychology majors and biology majors and finance majors and performing arts majors. And, that makes for that diversity of experience that our staff members have had, makes for a more interesting and lively admissions committee and, overall dynamic for the office.
True. Well, and it reflects what you're looking for in a class as you recruit is that diversity.
100%.
To have that on your team makes a difference.
Yeah.
So describe a little bit about Elon University.
Sure. Elon is a private university. We're located in central North Carolina. We have 7,000 students total, 6,300 undergraduates. So we're predominantly an undergraduate focused institution. 70 majors inside five schools. We have a College of Arts and Sciences, which is Phi Beta Kappa. We have our highest accreditation possible in the schools of business with AACSB, the School of Communications with ACE-JMC, and our Dr. Joe Watts Williams School of Education. We also have a School of Health Sciences with graduate programs in physical therapy and physician assistant studies, as well as a Bachelor of Science in Nursing and an accelerated Bachelor of Science in Nursing. All of that is pretty typical. I'll say that. I mean, I know that there are lots of colleges and universities that have that array of offerings. I think what makes Elon distinctive is its focus on experiential education. And even that I know is not terribly unique, but what is unique is that some of those experiences are literally built into the curriculum at Elon. So we have this program that we call we call it the Elon experiences. And they are global study and leadership and service and undergraduate research and internships. And students have to do 2 of those in order to graduate. Frankly, most students do all of them. But what that does is it creates a graduate who has had, who has a cultural competency, a professional competency, a vast understanding of a particular field because of their research, some leadership experience. And it really, it yields great success in terms of our graduates, finding employment or going on to graduate school. We also have the #1 study abroad program in the country. And while we can talk about rankings all day long, I don't love to talk about rankings all day long, but for about 14, 15 years in a row, Elon has had the highest percentage of undergraduates studying abroad among colleges and universities nationally. And so I feel like I'll call us a pioneer in that. Every school has these things, but at Elon, it's almost impossible to graduate without these experiences. And then the last thing I'll say is that size lends itself to a lot of great opportunities. An average class of 20, no classes larger than 33, faculty who love to teach, serve as mentors. It's all about the strength of relationships that I think really help develop a student who is also having these kinds of experiences that really create a well-rounded individual. So, plus it's a beautiful campus. Working on a university campus is a wonderful thing. And when you work for your alma mater, it's, I think, even more special.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think the size of the university, as from a counselor perspective, we always hear students who don't want to go to a really small school and then going to a really big school, they'll get lost. But finding that in between, that 6,000, 7,000, as you've described, that's kind of the just right size, because it gives them a little bit more experience and exposure than maybe they had in high school, but they're not getting lost in the large university. And so you are able to do all those things like the Elon experience and execute them really well. And what a difference they can make in a student's life and future.
Yeah. We also have Division I athletics. So, we have, to your point, Cyndy, the large school experiences with the more, I don't want to call it intimate, because it's not, but it's a smaller school setting. Not a small college, but again, to your point, the kind of environment where you're not going to get lost, you're not going to know everyone, but you're going to see, as I was meeting with the Student Government Association leadership this morning, along with the president, and they were talking about Elon being a place where you recognize a lot of people, but it's too big to know everyone, but too small to feel lost in the crowd. And I think, to your point, again, the size really does matter.
Yeah, it does. It really does. So for students who are wanting to apply to the university and be accepted, sometimes they send in their transcript and then there's a high school profile that goes along with it. Can you explain and describe what a high school profile is?
Sure. Yeah, a high school profile is a really important piece for us as an admissions committee, particularly as we're, creating applicant. Our records team creates the application, prepares it for the admissions committee to review. And essentially, the high school profile is a pretty comprehensive description of the high school. It's really important for us as admissions staff members selecting candidates for admission to have some context. We get applications from schools all over the world. I think last I checked was 1,500 schools, and 3,500 schools around the globe, and they're all very different. And honestly, one of the most frequently asked questions that we receive from students and families is, well, if I go to this school, I have this GPA, but if I were to go to this other school, it might be more rigorous and I would have a lower GPA or a higher GPA. And how do you do that? And for us, frankly, the go-to response, which I think is very, very real, is admissions decisions are contextual. And when we read applications, we have that context because of the high school profile and the information that's provided to us about the school. That's the other reason we also do a lot of travel, so we can get to know the schools and have a sense of what's offered there. But we can't get to all the schools from which we get applications. So knowing about your high school is really, really important as we evaluate candidates for admission.
So what do you want to see in that profile?
Yep. There are several things that we like to see. First and foremost, candidly, the most simple thing is we want good contact information. We need to know who to contact if we have questions, particularly, administratively, certainly the college counseling office, but the administration is really important for us if we have questions. We want to know about the curriculum that's available there. Does the school offer, some schools indicate that all of their classes are taught at an honors level. Well, we don't know that unless you tell us that. Some schools offer AP coursework. Some schools don't offer even an honors curriculum. So we need to know those kinds of things. Is the school an international baccalaureate school? So that's helpful for us because when we're looking at the courses that a student has chosen and we're evaluating a student, of course, the most important thing is we're looking for candidates who we believe will succeed at Elon. And in doing so, if we understand the course rigor that you've engaged in, that gives us a sense of your ability to be successful here. So I would say the curriculum is really important. And then, as I alluded to, curriculum rigor, what type of coursework is it? Sometimes that is not on the profile. Sometimes that's on the actual transcript, and that's fine too. But again, these and other things, but I think these are the main things that we're trying to derive about our candidates for admission from the profile. And those are things that you frankly have to work to get in other ways if your application is not accompanied by a profile. So that's what's really important to us. Those are the three things that I think, there are other things that we can talk about too, but when in terms of preparing an application for review, those are the things that are most important.
Okay. Now, many high schools are also offering dual enrollment options. So, or several classes online and, to supplement their curriculum. Knowing that kind of thing, is that helpful?
It's very helpful, and I'll tell you why. Well, as I was sort of rattling off AP and IB, I meant to say dual enrollment as well, because consider that, obviously not just for university credit potentially, but that's a level of rigor that not every student engages in. So, at Elon, and I don't want to get too specific, but I think this is helpful in terms of giving you a sense as to how we use the profile. We actually recalculate every student's GPA. So, there's a GPA that's on your transcript, but we're taking into account the same 5 essential courses or required courses for all candidates for admission. And that's a response, that's another response to the question that we get about, how do you consider students from so many different schools? Well, we're considering students from so many different schools because we are taking into account as very consistently as we can the same core courses, and we are assigning weight to the particular level of rigor. So an honors course receives weight, an AP course receives weight, dual enrollment, IB, and so on. So that's why the profile is so incredibly important to the process here.
What don't you want to see on a profile?
That's a really good question, because when you provided that to me earlier, I thought, what's not helpful? And I think I would say to you, it's not so much what I don't want to see on a profile, it's what maybe we don't use on the profile. So, there are, I would say that those 3 things that I mentioned are helpful for the student, and that's what's most important in this process. But there may be, other pieces of information. Grade distribution, frankly, is not something we use for our process, but that doesn't mean that one of our peer institutions or any of the other schools to which students also apply when they apply to Elon, doesn't mean they don't use it. But again, when I think of that question, which is a good one, I think about how we use the profile as opposed to what's something I don't want to see. I'll tell you something else I like to see on profiles. This is just it's a personal and a professional thing. Because after 32 years of working in enrollment, I've been to a lot of high schools around the globe. It's a great privilege. And I like to know where students go from that high school. Obviously, the percentage of students going on to 4-year college is helpful for us to know. Obviously, the demographics of the high school are good for us to know, really important for us to know. But also, it's helpful to know, oftentimes schools will list not just the schools, but the colleges and universities where students from that high school have applied and been admitted, but also where they're matriculating. I'll tell you very honestly, Cyndy, the reason I like that so much is because if we're not on that list, we would love to be on that list in future years. So we're taking that into consideration too in the admissions process. Again, first and foremost, the student's ability to be successful here. But I want to be on as many lists as possible because we want representation from as many students as possible. So it's a little selfish there.
well, but it makes total sense. I mean, there's a difference between colleges students apply to, that's especially now, that number is just ballooned, and then accepted to, but matriculated, that is the key.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because sometimes I'm a little disappointed when that piece of information is not on the transcript. Oftentimes it's just the applicants or the number of admits over a 3 to 5 year period, or maybe just in the last year. But to your point, you're right. Applications have ballooned. Frankly, we joined the Common Application only 4 years ago. So we've seen a huge increase in our applications in the last few years, in large part because of that. So again, it's especially telling when we have an understanding as to where students are going from that particular school.
So how should high schools use their profile? What would you recommend from that?
How should they use their own? In other words, what should they make sure that they include in that? Yeah.
Well, and do they? Because sometimes high schools, like I know in this area, they don't even know that they're supposed to send the profile with the transcript. Are there other ways that they can give it to the representatives when they come to their high school? What are some other ways that they can use that profile to build a better understanding of the
that happens often, by the way, when we're traveling. A high school counselor will give up. First of all, we love to meet with high school counselors. Let me just say that again. We love to meet with high school counselors, and we know you're busy. Believe me, we know you see a lot of us. At the same time, if you can spend 5 minutes just to get a quick update, we value that because it gives us an opportunity to share with you what's going on at our institution. But similarly, it's really helpful for you to tell us, a little bit about the school itself, in addition to, what's going on this year that's new kind of thing. But providing that information is really helpful when we visit, because we'll take it, and often if we have an opportunity to meet with students, but even if we don't, it gives us a read on the school, and that's just really helpful. There, especially if it's a school that's new, because I think that you'll find from most colleges and universities, we're looking to go to more schools, to meet students at a broader array of schools. And if that school is new to us, you're really doing us the benefit of educating us about the context from which your potential applicants can come. So use it as, I'm going to call it a marketing opportunity, because that's what it is. And it tells us about not just who is at the school, but what you offer those students, so that we can best use that information in the decision-making process.
And thank you. I appreciate that, because it is a marketing opportunity. Sometimes high schools, I think, take it a little too far and sacrifice some of those context and details that you need. So we need to kind of find that middle ground to make it informative, but also, give you some factual things.
Yeah.
But do you need a list of every AP class that ever been offered, or every college every student's applied to? That often takes up a lot of room on an
and especially when you're reading thousands of applications, like a lot of colleges and universities are, probably don't need it to be too many pages of information. So yeah, that's a good point. Do we need to know what classes are offered at the AP or IB level? I think in some ways the answer is yes, because again, we're assigning weight in our process.
Mm-hmm.
I was frankly, in preparation for this conversation yesterday, I was reading some high school profiles from schools I was literally just pulling out of my head because I had been there or hadn't been there. Frankly, I wanted to see the difference in public versus private, international schools, and so on. And I think some of the ones that are the strongest, we often say less is more. And I know it sounds a little contradictory to say that, but we need this, this, and this. But I think if you can sort of provide probably the most salient things, like the rigor and demographics of the high school, those are really the things that are most important. The other things that are just helpful to know are a little bit like the things we talked about with regard to where students go. So, okay.
So is there anything else that counselors, advisors should know about the high school transcripts? The high school profiles or transcripts? What else would you like to convey to counselors to help make your job easier and make our job easier?
Yeah. I often find, and this is just an observation, that in the fall we'll visit high schools and counselors will say, we're still working on the new profile. It'll be ready by the time we submit applications. And that's great. Honestly, there are times I'll say to a counselor, you know what, you sent us so many students over the years, you don't have to give me last year's profile. I'm good. We know the school, and we have a great relationship already. So, I one thing I would say is, and this is me saying this, I have no sway over this whatsoever, but I feel like sometimes there's this rush in the fall. You're inundated with college admissions representatives, and you feel like you've got to get the profile done so you can, share it with your constituents or college constituents. I say, don't worry about that. It's more valuable to us to make sure that we get it along with the applications rather than receiving it when we visit. If you have it ready, great. We'd love to take it and have that information, because honestly, what we do is we will bring it back to the office and give it to our director of applications so that we have it on file, the latest one on file. But I guess one thing I would just say is don't feel rushed to do it. The most important thing is that it's ready and updated by the time your students are applying. And if there's anything that is most important, I think it's the things that we talked about here: course offerings, curriculum rigor, and demographics of the school, so that we have a sense of who the student what type of environment the student has been learning in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and that, that goes back to the different things that we were talking about. And, that makes it that eases the pressure a little bit. It's like, we don't do everything. We can, focus on those things. And that's really helpful.
Yeah.
For high schools, let me ask this question. This just occurred to me. So many of them had a different grading system during COVID. Kids were home, they were pass fail. Those students are now going to be applying. They've had 2 years of their high school in unusual education experience. So do you need any notation on profiles about that? Especially since we're just coming out of that experience.
Yes, I'm really glad you asked that, because I think the short answer is yes. I mean, again, we need to know again, it's a little different in that we are assigning our own weight based on what we're seeing. But honestly, there are some schools that are on a 7-point, and this is not exactly what you're asking, Cyndy, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But some schools have a 7-point scale. Well, we use ours on a 10-point scale. So if at the high school, a 92 is a B, here at Elon, that's an A. That's how we standardize it across the board. So, I think that nuances associated with the pandemic are going to be really important. We know, we're seeing it already. We know. I couldn't do it. 2 years of learning virtually, I just don't think I could have done it. So I applaud students for getting to this point and for being successful in that process. I guess I could have done it, right? Because oftentimes we don't know what we can do until we have to do it. At the same time, we recognize all colleges and universities and admissions offices, admissions committees recognize that these have been a different 2 years, very different than any students who have come through the process before. And that could have lifelong implications. So if there has been a change to the way a school has evaluated candidates during the pandemic, especially because it's been virtual learning, which we know there has been a lot of change, that notation is helpful for us as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's similar to what I often say to students about the personal statement on the application.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big thing. I know that when something is optional, it drives you crazy, and that's not our intent. Like it's optional or optional personal statement. But I often say the more information we have about you as a candidate for admission, the better we can evaluate you as a candidate. And that's what we want. And again, I also say we're the admissions office. We are looking for reasons to admit you. I think oftentimes you think that we're here looking to deny you. No, we're the admissions office. Our goal is to create a community. So when you apply, or when students apply, I hope they realize that we're really a committee of human beings whose goal is to find reasons to offer you admission because we think that you bring something really special to our community.
I love that. And I think that's a very positive perspective that a lot of times gets lost in the shuffle and some of the media and frenzy and things, and people forget that is. I love that you emphasize it's the admissions office. That's your whole purpose. So
yeah.
Greg, thank you so much. This has been so informative. And if anybody has any questions or needs some clarification, what should they do?
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to help anyone answer a question. You're more than welcome to reach out to me if that's helpful to you. It's just Zaiser, Zaiser @elon.edu, just my last name. But that's one of the things I love about the work that we do is we, not meaning just Elon, but I think my colleagues at colleges and universities. I mean, Cyndy, you and I met at a conference, and we struck up a conversation which led to this conversation. We're all here to help. We want to be able to answer questions. And as I said to some new staff members, don't rely on the reading material only. Pick up the phone and call us or send us an email. We're delighted to be helpful because ultimately that helps students. And that's a really positive thing.
That sounds great.
Happy to answer any questions.
That sounds great. Thank you very much, Greg.
My pleasure, Cyndy. Great to see you.
Good to see you too. We will be in touch.
I look forward to it. Thanks.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.